I was in Alaska, and I had gone up there with a girlfriend, and I said, what am I doing here? Everybody wants to get married, and I just gotten out of a marriage, and I just was not the type that was going to be married and have a family. I don't know why, but it wasn't in my books. And so I thought, I'm not going to stay here. And so I took a plane to Chicago. And then in Chicago, I said, well, I want to be in show business. I've wanted to be a showgirl. Everybody says, oh, you're tall, you should be a showgirl. So I'd pick up the newspaper, there's an ad, they want a showgirl for a show. It was a Gypsy Rose Lee show, and an outdoor show. Well, I didn't know what, I was from northern Canada. We didn't have carnivals or anything like that, and I didn't know what I was getting into, but I thought, well, this is a chance. It's only it's only for about 3 or 4 months, so I said, I'll take a chance. I went to Chicago, and somebody said, well, go check Minsky's. So went to Minsky's, and of course they hired me as a showgirl, and I was there for a few months, and I was taking dance lessons, and oh, the choreographer, he was so mean to me, and he would just, he would yell at me and scream at me because I didn't have timing on I couldn't keep time to the music, and it was so frustrating for him. And so finally, after about 3 months, I said, I know it all. I'm going to go to New York now. I'm ready for New York. So I went to Lou Walters, and he said, oh, wow, we'll hire you, but come back at 7 o'clock, and I have another girl that's probably a little taller than you are, and maybe the two of you could, go together and form a line where you have two to start with. And then I showed up at 7 o'clock that night, and the other girl was very small boned, and she was tall, but she was much shorter than I was. And he says, I guess this isn't going to work. He says, why don't you don't want to be a showgirl, you'd only make $75 a week. You can make $250 to $500 a week as in burlesque. So I said, me, take my clothes off? I said, never. And then he said, well, $500 is a good salary. And I said, well, I'm alone, and I like to be independent, and it was a good salary. So I said, all right. He said, go see Dave Cohen, who was the big agent then for burlesque. And of course, he hired me right away, and he told me where to get my pictures taken, and got a choreographer and my costumes and everything. And within 2 weeks, I was working. But see, I always had the money. I always saved half of everything I made, so that when I went into anything new, I didn't have to say, well, I need to borrow money or anything. I had it. So I immediately got the pictures at, I think, Marie Seymour, and the Jacks of Hollywood was my costumer. Choreographer was, well, I guess Jacks of Hollywood. Later on, I went with Luigi, and I used to take my dance lessons there. Every time I had a week off, I was up there from 8 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. Take a few breaks, but I was always wanting to do better because I knew I wasn't a dancer to begin with, and that did help me. And okay, now Lou was. So then I started working in New England nightclubs, and within a few months, they sent me up to this theater in Montreal, and I said, gee, they got Irene on all the buses. Gee, I wonder who she is. And here it was, they were advertising me. I survived. Everybody, the audience liked me because I had that innocence about me where I didn't really know what I was doing, I guess. And so I was never canceled or anything. And then from there I went to work the theater. The theaters and the places where in Chicago, where I was just a chorus girl or a show girl just a few months ago, all of a sudden I come in as the headliner. But by that time they had started calling me Ricki Covette, the world's tallest dancer, which incidentally I was, because at the time Lois DeFee was advertising herself as being the tallest, and she was 6'4", or she said she was 6'4". So I had oh, I was supposed to go to Philadelphia, and they had closed they were closed down for something, and then I filled in Chicago, in New York City on 52nd Street, which I never wanted to work because it was mostly mixing clubs. But I worked this club, and she was across the street, so she had decided to come and see me. So she walks in, struts in, and all of a sudden she looks up and she turns around and walks out because she knew I was taller than she was, you know, the fact that she had to look up to me. I was tall when I was very small, very young, I should say. In fact, there was quite a thing when I was born. I was like, I had yellow jaundice, and I was skinny and tall, and Dad said, oh, I don't want to take her home. We'll leave her here at the hospital. And Mom says, oh, no, we're going to take her home. And I was sort of an embarrassment to the family, especially to my father. If somebody came, he'd say, we'll go in the other room, because he didn't want them to see, you know, me. And then when I started school, I started when I was 5, because so that I wouldn't be that much taller than the rest of the class. And even though it was a small country school. But I guess I grew, well, even at 5, I was tall enough to where he was really concerned. And, but then I just lived through it, and I had to take a lot of heat from people. Oh, you know, string bean and beanpole and skinny, and then of course my sister, she loved to dance, and this is where I got wanting to dance from, and we would go to the Grange Hall dances that they used to have in the country, you know, like in Washington State. And everybody would want to dance with her. They'd dance every dance. And I would sit there and nobody would ask me. And one time a gentleman did ask me, and I stood up, and he was gone when he looked up and saw I was taller than he was. Because then it seemed to be, you know, the girls were shorter than the men. And so I never had nobody would ever dance with me. So I said, well, then I'll dance by myself. I'll show them. So as an exotic, I could dance by myself. Oh, I was at my lowest point. I had been very ill with, well, I have neuropathy to begin with, and I had bunches of problems. I have a new pacemaker, and I had an infection in my feet, and all of these things, and I was just lying there in bed, and I think, oh gosh, what? And then the phone rings, and they said, well, you know, you were voted the top world's #1 exotic dancer. And I said, who is this? And that was Chanel from Washington, or Alexandria, Virginia. And she's connected to, I don't know in what way, but she's connected to the Smithsonian. So she said that they voted me #1, and then Australia called me and wanted me to go to Australia, and I said, I don't want to go to Australia. I don't care about being #1 in Australia. And then she pursued me and said she was coming out here. She was going to Vegas, and she'd like to stop by and see me. So she and her husband stopped by and came out, and I had my autograph album, which I had done a really nice job on mine, because I saved everything and I made it very interesting. And so they didn't say too much, but the next thing they know, they were pursuing me for the Smithsonian, and eventually they had asked me, well, they had permission to have my pictures right away. They wanted everything that I had as far as my scrapbooks were concerned. But they weren't too sure about the gowns and everything, because then they'd have to make a showcase out of it, and they didn't know whether they wanted to go that route. But in the meantime, they're still negotiating, but it'll happen. I'll make it happen. I made the most of every situation, and I just really enjoyed what I was doing and did it to the best of my ability. And then when I felt it was time to quit, like burlesque, I thought, well, I've done everything I've wanted to do in burlesque, and I didn't like being referred to as a guy. then I just decided I would quit, and within a week I was in real estate, studying for the exam, and then passed my exams, and there again, like I say, I worked, not thinking that I was good enough. I kept working harder and harder. I've done everything I've ever wanted to do. When I was in Canada, I was going up in the basement, up in the attic of this little log cabin that we lived in, and I found this picture of Joan Fontaine. And I said, Joan Fontaine, oh, she's so beautiful. I would love to be like her. And I would take her picture and I'd pose in front of the mirror when nobody was looking, of course, you know, they were out working. And then later on, I was asked if I wanted to do a marriage go-around with Joan Fontaine. I thought, wow, you know, that was one thing when I was 9, or I was about 10 or 11, I was thinking, I had to think that I've actually gotten to the point where I could do a picture with her. And I worked hard. I studied, and I got that Swedish accent down to a T, like they do in Wisconsin, not like they do in Sweden, but like the accent they have in Wisconsin, which is what my teacher was from, I guess. But and I enjoyed the tour. We went to some of the colleges. It wasn't a very long tour, a couple of months, I think, a couple of months or so on. And otherwise, you know, some people say, well, don't you regret not having a family? And I said, no, because I wouldn't want to have another basketball team. There are enough basketball players because with my height, I would probably have some very tall children, and I didn't want them to go through all the problems that I had, or I felt I had. And so even now, I'm content, you know. I have a wonderful boyfriend and a caregiver, and then of course when I met Stuart Jewell, we toured the world for 5 years. And first of all, we went all through China shooting steam trains, and I was his assistant. And then we went down to South Africa and Victoria Falls and all around, and then back up to China, and then also to Lhasa, Tibet, which very few people have been able to get to. And we toured, and I really had a wonderful time. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed their food. I would eat their food. The minute I got to their country, I didn't say, well, I don't use chopsticks. I used chopsticks. Even if I had to go hungry, I was going to use them. And just ate all of their foods. Like up in Tibet, I had yak burgers. They're good. A little bit on the sweet side, but they're good. And I just always enjoyed every place I was. I enjoyed and did the most of it. I tried to learn their customs and also their religions, and more or less live the way they did to a point. And even now, I still, every time I travel, like I went to England, and there was another couple there that were on the show with me, and they said, well, where's McDonald's? Where's McDonald's? You're in England, you want to eat the English food. No, they wanted McDonald's, hamburgers. So I guess, I don't think they even had McDonald's at that time there, but like I ate whatever their local food was, and I enjoyed it. I like to learn. You don't learn by sticking your nose in a hamburger every day.